Anyway, so no, this is a natural progression. So we hire, and then, a month or two goes by. We're at an economic conference in Italy, Lake Como, which was nice. Beautiful hotel.
Or if I can say, as your friend Vadim calls it in a letter I want to ask you about in a minute that we got, it was May of 2014. Following our talks during the visit to the Como Lake.
Yes, the Como Lake. Exactly. Lake Como. Absolutely. It was gorgeous weather, and it was May of 2014. And so, that trip in D.C. Vadim had been on that trip. I forget if there's other executives there, meeting at the law firm in the conference center or large conference room, and got a lot done, and it seemed to be off to a good start. They visited us, Vadim and Nikolai visited us at the Villa d'Este at this economic conference. And Hunter, was of, the relationship manager at the time of counsel, and they, kind of struck up a conversation, and Kwasniewski was not there, but on WhatsApp and kind of in the conversation. And I think, similar to what, as opposed to like me being a mark in an orchestrated effort to get Hunter on board, I think they all of a sudden saw, the relationship that I brought by doing this, and thought, wait, we can go a step further. We got the president of Poland. We've got this, a couple of finance guys on the board. We've got a couple of Ukrainians and Cypriots for regulatory reasons in those, in those domiciles. And we can get the son of the vice president on the board. And, they saw that opportunity, and they made the offer. And I think
at the meeting in Lake Como.
At the meeting in Lake Como.
So that's fast.
I was not at that meeting, but it was a meeting that was done in a sidebar and the idea came back, and I think a month later it was.
So what's so interesting? So here's this letter that I referred to at the Como Lake. And it's May 12th, 2014, 8:29 a.m. And this is from Vadim Pozharsky to you and Hunter. And he goes on, and it's kind of complicated about what he's talking about, corruption in Ukraine. But he gets here. He says, "We urgently need your advice on how you could use your influence to convey a message, signal, etc., to stop what we consider to be politically motivated actions, etc." And that's from Vadim. So
right.
They figured it out right away.
Absolutely, yes. The term signal in every other kind of market or theater or whatever you want to describe, it's like a pretty, it's a well-used term. So signal, like the U.S. doesn't use it, but it's a very common term to send signals between government and business, because government can always shut you down. It's almost like the shakedown kind of, I try to equate it to something, but you always want to be sending positive signals from that regulatory body, i.e. the government, to the business that you're not going to be shut down.
Right.
And so I think they're using in common term to them and sending back here to us and say, I hope we're protected kind of thing. That's the term signal.
Well, he just flat out says it. Yeah, exactly. We urgently need your advice on how you can use your influence. Right. So, and that's all kind of, again, just for context, it's pretty conventional.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's what lobbying firms are for.
Yes. But then comes the question of General Shokan, the prosecutor.
Right.
Tell us, that seems to me, that's when it gets heavy.
Right. Okay.
So what was that?
So Shokin was I'm going to get the dates wrong, but Shokin was he was the prosecutor, the head prosecutor in Ukraine. And he was taking a close look at Burisma.
So maybe not so different from an attorney general.
Right. But he was taking, much more case active, I think.
Right.
An attorney general is more of like a manager of people that handle cases, and they have their independence.
This guy's the law.
He's like the law, yeah. So the buck stops with him. Hence, the signals are more important in countries outside the United States. So Shokin is taking a close look at Burisma. There were allegations that some of the deposits or some of the reserves were not, authentically acquired or whatever it may be. And so those were I think that was the genesis of the complaints. And there were always, being in Ukraine and being in that part of the world, there was always kind of challenges that they were facing, they're from not being able to get a visa to money being tied up in London, and this was just another, in a series of issues that law firms and strategic advisory firms were hired for to handle these kind of things, right?
Yeah.
So the Shokin case was, he was taking a look at Burisma, and there was a big push by European leaders, the Atlantic Council, et cetera, to fire Shokin because he was corrupt. Like it's hard to kind of decipher who's corrupt. It's all.
Can I just ask you,
corrupt.
just sidebar, like why would the Atlantic Council be getting involved in Shokin?
Well,
here. I mean, that's
I mean, I think I don't know on the Shokin piece. I mean, again,
this is the lead prosecutor in Ukraine.
Right.
So if Ukraine is actually a country with sovereignty and not just a colony of, say, the neocons in the United States, like why wouldn't they just let Ukraine deal with their own? Like why would Western powers even get involved in who the chief prosecutor in Ukraine is?
That's a question that I don't know.
I couldn't control myself. So, but within Burisma,
right,
this Shokin was considered a threat to your business. Obviously.
Shokin was considered a threat to the business. I think anyone in, again, you got to get the signals to the government. I think anyone in government was always a threat, and always trying to shake down these businesses that were highly successful and enriching the owners and the staff and the board and whatever. Yeah. And so at the end of the day, Shokin was taking a look, and again, if I wasn't involved in Shokin or any of this, but he was a threat. He ended up seizing assets of Nikolai, a house, some cars, a couple properties, and Nikolai actually never went back to Ukraine after Shokin seized all of his assets. And the case was, I mean, and obviously it's all out there. The case was that Shokin, there was all this pressure to fire Shokin from this, the larger community, and then he was fired, and then somehow Burisma was let off the hook. I mean, that's what the story was.
And Joe Biden, of course, was the driving force behind his firing.
Yeah, he was involved in that. There's obviously video.
Involved? I mean, Biden bragged at Council on Foreign Relations, they had $1 billion coming from IMF, and I said, if you don't fire this man, you're not getting the $1 billion.
Right. But it's I think on this one, it certainly wasn't made clear to us at the board level, that there was that was a favor to be done. The narrative, I don't know the narrative, and I don't want to. I don't want to lead anyone down that kind of path. That's what happened, because I don't know the narrative.
But Joe Biden knew that his son was on the board of this company that was being hassled by the prosecutor whose firing he was calling for.
Right.
Yeah. And this took place 3 years after he sent you a letter saying thanks for all the work you're doing with Hunter. So clearly he would know this would benefit the family.
Right. I don't want to get it, but the narrative was that Shokin was already taken care of. That was the popular narrative. That's the only thing that
he was already on his way out.
Exactly. That was the narrative that was fed to the board.
Okay, so you were told when Shokin got fired that it had nothing to do with it.
No, we were told that was bad and we don't want a new prosecutor. Shokin was taken care of. So it's this is not like, checkers. This is multiple dimensions here. So a popular...
This is like Connect 4.
Yeah, no, exactly. It's I think in this particular case, it's pretty high stakes and pretty sophisticated. So the narrative that I was told was that. That's just, I've said it under oath and I'll say it again. That was the narrative.
That was the narrative. Were you aware... Do you have knowledge that Hunter spoke to his dad about Burisma?
Do I have knowledge?
Yes. Do you know that Hunter spoke to his dad about Burisma? Did you ever see them talk about it, hear them talk about it?
No, I don't have knowledge of that, though I'd assume it.
You would assume it.
Right. I would assume it in a general sense of travel and that kind of thing. But on, I've told a lot of people in the past, there was not business content conversations. It was the idea of signals and influence. The prize is enough in speaking or hearing or knowing that you have that proximity to power. No one is so unsophisticated that's been in politics for 50 years that Hunter is going to talk about, the last quarter's, how many billion cubic meters of gas we pumped out of the ground.
Right.
So it's just, I think a lot of the narrative gets caught up on, over speculation of these conspiracy theories that are just not true. I think
That's not the way it actually
It just
works.
doesn't work like that.
So it's enough to be sitting at a meal at Lake Como with your new Ukrainian friends, and your dad happens to call. Let's put him on speaker.
That would be that's. I think that's enough. That's the second most powerful man in the world. It's just how the world works.
So there's been a lot of effort on the part of Republicans to prove money transfers from Hunter to Joe.
Right.
And then there's the other brother, Jimmy, who I'm going to ask about in a minute. But so far there are hints of it, but we haven't seen the direct transfer. But did you ever wonder when you were in the Biden orbit, like, how do they live so well? I mean, Hunter grew up at a huge house in Wilmington. The family had this very expensive beach house. And like, how do you do that on a politician's salary? We don't pay our politicians very much.
Well, I think Hunter had a successful lobbying and advisory business.
Sure, but these are his dad's houses.
Right.
Like, how does that, did you ever wonder, like, how do you do that?
Well, at that question, I really only was under the kind of tenure at the Naval Observatory, so I knew the government was paying. We were paying for it.
Yeah, no, of course, but like they had these other houses.
Yeah, I was at Bo's house, I was at Hunter's house, but those were the houses. So that was not something that I often thought about. Put it that way.
Okay. It's just interesting because you're coming from a non-political world on Long
Yeah.
Island, middle-class world, and you wind up in, around all these high flyers.
Yeah. Right. I mean,
and some of them but don't have business jobs. They have political jobs, but they're living really, really well.
Yeah. I thought the cost of living was lower and what. No, I don't, it is pretty remarkable. It's
pretty
beautiful,
weird, right?
Suburban place to live. And I mean, I think the money that's thrown around DC is significant. I mean, as far as lobbying contracts and legal contracts and all of the bills that go out, and I mean, there's money flow. I mean, it certainly is.
But it sticks to the people who live there. Like the money's supposed to go out to the whole continent.
Right. Yeah, that's a bigger discussion.
Doesn't? Interesting. So when Biden called for Shokin to be fired,
right,
very publicly, and then got it done, like, bam.
Right.
What did you think?
Again, the narrative. They've tried to beat this into my head a million times because it does work on paper as far as the logical steps. But we were told that Shokin had already been taken care, that he was under control, and that this is going to be a whole big problem for Burisma now.
It's a huge problem
because Shokin. I mean, I don't know.
The guy who was going to shut our business down just got fired. Oh no!
It's just what it was. It was kind of pounded into our heads. Obviously, as I look back in the rear view, it doesn't paper as well. But it looks like there was something.
I'm asking you because you said at the outset that, well, first of all, that you liked Hunter,
absolutely,
who was a very likable. I can attest personally, a very likable guy,
absolutely,
but that you thought it was, useful. He knows his way around Washington. His dad's vice president of the United States. All this stuff. It's all good. But that there was the Icarus problem.
Right.
That like if you use those contexts too much, maybe it hurts you. Maybe you
absolutely.
get burned by it. Did you feel that when Shokin got fired, like, ooh, maybe this is a little little close to the sun here?
No, on that one, I just was kind of listen. I was believing the narrative because we were in where I felt the Icarus was when he announced we were in Doha. As one is running around with some of the royal family at another conference, and part of the benefits of actually doing the Rosemont Seneca partnership, you're getting access in these meetings. Anyway, long story short, we're in Doha, and they release some picture on the website that Hunter had joined the board. And that was that was like the tipping point where Icarus had arrived a little too close to the sun.
Yeah.
And the rest of my story has, been a slow downward.
Yeah. The trajectory changed at that point.
It was like this, exactly. That was the Icarus moment. When I saw that release and I saw It was the middle of night.
Burisma that had released that?
Burisma released it, didn't tell us, and it was like the most Googled news story like in the world for 18 hours. And I was like, this is going to be a different
because
world.
To a civilian, you're thinking, okay, huge, super lucrative Eastern European natural gas company,
incredible.
Sort of semi-employed kind of lawyer lobbyist from D.C. Like, what is he doing on their board? Like, it just seemed...
Right.
Yeah.
And it really, at the time, I was not, I didn't have, we didn't calculate the risk appropriately. And the rest is history.
So whether or not Hunter convinced his dad to come out against Shokin, and there's debate.
Right.
It was very clear that the Burisma guys were hoping to leverage Hunter's relationship with the vice president, his father.
Yes.
At one point, they told Hunter to, quote, call his dad?
Yeah, I think referencing the email that you put earlier, there was constant pressure to send signals, to leverage all of his dad included, but the Biden brand, all of the DC insider and relationships to help Burisma survive. I think that's at the end of the day what we're talking about.
I mean, that was the
idea.
That's what he brought.
It was that ability to help on the geopolitical stage, keep them out of trouble, keep them out of investigations, unfreeze assets, unsuccessfully, unfreeze visas, and the first challenge, which was there was a 23 million pound account that was released to Burisma because of alleged non-cooperation by the prosecutor. I don't know if Shokin or the guy before that, but that was successful, and I think.
Did Hunter help with that?
The perception of him being on the board probably provided a halo that helped with that, but no active. There was no active.
But they were not consulting him on like pipeline construction or wellhead design.
No. It was hiring lobbyists and law firms to and various like NGOs to help clear the path from regulatory roadblocks at the end of the day.
When they asked him to call his dad, did he?
I was not privy to the conversation directly, but they've asked, that was, Vadim met with his dad at dinner at Cafe Milano, a famous dinner at Cafe Milano. I did not listen to a particular call where they spoke, but I know that the request was made by Vadim a lot.
What did Vadim say to the vice president at that dinner at Cafe Milano?
At dinner was, politics. I think there was a World Food Program element, weather, nothing specific to Burisma.
But the idea was by having that relationship and by saying, I met with the vice president in Washington, that gives him SWAT.
Yeah, I think at the end of that's the, the prize, or the, being able to have, whether it's on, speakerphone or in person, to have, that person in direct contact, whether you're talking about, weather or, politics or what have you, that's the important part. I don't think, there's no relevance in asking, the vice president about, the gas,
right,
revenues or anything
it's
like that. It was never, it's enough. And the prize is that contact and that access to power.
What was the payment like from Burisma? Like, what did Hunter get? I mean, he famously made $83,000 a month.
It was 80. Yeah, it was taken into a company. It was 283. Like the contracts were around board seats, and then the kind of scope of work was him on the governance side, as we've talked about. And I was in, first to raise capital, but then after the Doha, Google situation where they announced him on the board, raising outside capital was out. So it became international expansion. So the payment was $2 million a year to one of our LLCs. There were other business activities that happened in that. We had to pay some of the Cap Intro guys that introduced us initially through the Rosemont Realty. So he, the payments were, and I think it's incredibly well documented. Initially, it was about $700,000 a year. It built to about $1 million, and then it was, I think, less for the rest of his tenure.
The second his father left the VP's office, it went down.
I think that happened.
You think that happened?
I think that I was long out of it by then, but I think
So what about,
I've been told that.
What about gifts? And this is a part of the world where people give gifts,
right?
And those gifts are a kind of non-taxable payment. You could argue.
You could argue.
You could argue. Were there gifts?
There were some birthday gifts. A watch. A watch.
Just Timex kind of watch, or
no? What was the watch? I believe it was a Hue-Bolt.
a Hue-Bolt.
I'm not actually sure. I shouldn't even say that, but I don't know. But I know there's a birthday gift. I've also been refreshed in my memory through the series of documents that have been put in front of me.
Yeah, through your testimony to the Congress.
It might have been. Yeah. Exactly.
So a watch like that would cost like ballpark.
$50,000 to $100,000.
Yeah. So real gift.
A real gift, meaningful.
So you're working in Ukraine, and just based on our off-camera conversations, we're actually interested in the business.
Absolutely.
And it's kind of an interesting business, actually. It powers the world. So
right, it powers the world. And
meaningful business.
Yep.
In your time in Ukraine, did you notice a lot of Americans running around from Washington, exerting influence over there?
You know what? I think obviously it's an important part of the world. I think for different factions of different opposing East-West types of views. So yes, there were a lot of Americans lobbying, USAID, State Department officials. There were a lot of Americans kind of working.
Because the picture you paint doesn't sound like a sovereign country. It really does seem like a protectorate or something.
Yeah, I wouldn't. And the protectorate might be an overstep, but yes, there is a lot of interest in Ukraine and who controls Ukraine, and that's it's a geopolitical conversation. Did
you ever see Toria Nuland there?
I never saw her in person, but she was definitely. I think that was in her scope, in her theater.
Did she have a lot of influence in Ukraine?
She did, yeah, she did. She was. It was constantly trying to curry favor with her. She was one that you wanted on your good side, as I remember. I don't remember the specifics, whether it was, there were some issues with one of the ambassadors mentioned Burisma as corrupt at some point, and that was a big thing, and there was like a big effort to try and redact that. I think there was some lobbying done to her or with her, but
did it get done?
No, obviously Burisma. I think Nikolai, who came to New York and ate at Cat's Deli back in 2012, looking at the real estate pitch, ended up in Cyprus. I think he's still there. So no, nothing ever worked with that. Though I do believe that at the end of the day, Burisma wouldn't have stayed in business so long, if Hunter was not on the board.
So they got
their
money back.
I think they got some years.
Why did you leave?
I left in something completely unrelated.
Because you got in trouble with another company.
Correct. Exactly.
And so you got off the board, but Hunter stayed on.
Hunter stayed on, yeah.
How long did you remain in business with him?
After we had the issue with that other company, I was no longer in business.
With him?
With him. I was friendly. We retained a friendship for a couple of years, and then there was it's complicated and can't talk about it because it's an ongoing case. But there was a reversal of a conviction, and then there was subsequently that the reversal of conviction was re-reversed, and after the re-reversal, we kind of never spoke again.
For legal reasons, or was there enmity between you?
It was just no, absolutely no. There's again, looking back at the body of work, it was, a very big strategic mistake for me to, be involved with him. And some of it was my fault because, quite frankly, I was pitching Burisma Roosevelt Realty, and that ended up, that the genesis, that was me. But obviously, the trajectory of my life would have been far different and arguably far better if I'd never met him.
And you didn't make that much money from Burisma?
No, I think it was, relative to the world, yes, it was a lot of money. Relative to my middle-class upbringing, it was a ton of money, but it wasn't life-changing money, and it was quickly exhausted on legal bills.
Yeah. So how have you, what's interesting in this conversation is you're very sympathetic to Hunter Biden, the person, like you like him. You still
Right.
say you like him.
Absolutely.
You
His
worked
children. I mean, I've been to their lacrosse games. It's a good family, and they, they've got a great relationship, father and son. Speak every day. I witnessed that for 10 years.
So, and you're not, I mean, you work for John Kerry for president, so
Right.
you're obviously not
Right.
a partisan.
I was a volunteer. But
Yeah, but you're not a partisan actor. I think it's fair to say you're not
No,
grinding
not at all.
political acts
absolutely not.
here. How have you been treated by well, you obviously are a Democrat or were a Democrat most of your life anyway.
Well, I was never registered Democrat. I was registered independent, but just for the record. But I have been treated by, the treatment seems to be the treatment of just getting out ahead of this and speaking the truth and just retelling my story. That a lot of people seem to be interested. A lot of the negativity seems to come anonymously. Obviously there's murmurs of different folks saying different things, but the threats and stuff like that seem to come from whether they're AI bots or people in a basement in Cleveland. Not to pick on Cleveland, but
Probably Cleveland.
It might be. I don't know. I don't know. I can't kind of pinpoint it, but it is definitely it's a bit of a scary time.
The reaction to what you've said in public, to what you said to the committee on the Hill, and doubtless to what you've been telling us in this interview, is that there's no corruption here at all. This is totally normal. Joe Biden had no role whatsoever in his son's business or knowledge of it. But
right.
That seems false.
Yeah, I think that's categorically false. I think that he was aware of Hunter's business. He met with Hunter's business partners. You found a letter that illustrates that he knew me.
And he's thanking you. He's thanking you for his efforts.
So I think that was, I think
your efforts. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's not factually right. But in the same breath, there's no, I don't think Joe Biden's looked at a balance sheet or a cap table or what have you, or any financial document, probably ever.
Yeah.
So there
done
was
pretty well for not looking at.
Well, that's
yeah. So who's Jimmy Biden? His brother.
Jimmy Biden, his brother, that's Joe, the president's brother.
Yeah.
And he really picked up, post my, issues, and worked with him, in business that he got into in China and Romania, kind of after my tenure with Rosemont Seneca Partners. But I think he probably filled some void of, companionship and business companionship, in the years after I was basically.
Did you ever spend time with him?
Not a lot. 3 or 4 times. 3 or 4 times.
So he ran. There's not a lot written about him. He ran a nightclub for a while in Wilmington. I think that went under. Mm-hmm. But was it your sense that he had a high degree of business acumen?
He was always willing to. He was always willing. I have no real opinion about Jimmy, quite frankly. I know he likes Diet Mountain Dew. That's
Diet Mountain Dew.
Yeah, I'm a big Diet Mountain Dew guy. But I never did a business deal with him. I socially interacted with him on a very few occasions.
But did you think it's a little weird? So here's Hunter Biden, and here's the brother Jimmy with the Diet Mountain Dew. What is this exactly? This Biden brand? What is the business?
What is as a whole?
What is the business?
It's a diverse portfolio of opportunity.
It's a diverse portfolio of opportunity.
Yes.
Hunter and Jimmy.
Well, obviously, you've seen again, I keep referring to the rearview mirror. The portfolio has, exhausted, and Hunter's on to better things. So
he's an artist.
He is an artist, yes.
And I'm not going to offer any reviews of his work, but I just have to ask, in the many years that in the 10 years you spent with him, did he evidence any interest in painting?
Not particularly. But he was very, he was a very well-read student of history. So he was far more interested in, I wouldn't say artistic ventures, but certainly not painting. That was a surprise.
It was a surprise.
Yeah, it was a surprise.
What is that?
I think that after looking at the portfolio of our experiences,
Yes.
I might do the same thing.
You might do this.
Because, I mean, it's just, I mean, that's a long haul
For sure.
covered with tragedy and,
Yes.
addiction. And then going through all that, I think you just have to have a reset.
That makes sense to me. Getting $500,000 for your paintings like 6 months after you start painting seems a little weird. No?
I mean, I'm not. I mean, I do have smart artists in my family. I wish my grandfather got that, but yeah, no, that's.
Do you
good for
think
him.
I mean, your life has also taken, ups
Yeah.
and downs and
Right.
twists and turns you didn't expect. If you decided, like in 6 months, to start painting, do you think that you could get $500,000 a painting?
I don't know. It depends on how the show goes.
Do you think that's one of the opportunities open to you in your diverse portfolio
That's really why I'm here.
to pitch your paintings?
Exactly.
So
I'm starting.
a lot since the laptop came out. What'd you think of that, by the way? The
laptop?
Yeah. Were you shocked by that?
That was not great. Yeah, that was obviously I'm.
Oh, not great. That's in the not great category.
This is not great. Great. Yeah, that was a real bummer, I guess.
Yeah.
In the not great category. What did I think about it? I mean, it was an absolute shock that's perpetuated this, kind of nightmare that I've been living for the last.
Did he call
8
you
years.
when that came out?
No,
Yeah.
no, he did not.
Ooh.
No.
Because you're obviously on it.
Yeah, no, extensively.
Yeah.
Yes, not visually, but.
Right. Right. Not a single naked picture of you on that laptop.
There's not.
Thank heaven.
Yeah, all over it, and it's just led to just incessant and never-ending media fodder that brings me back in. And
Last question. A lot has been written about his drug and alcohol problems, and the laptop is a visual record of those.
right.
How did they affect your relationship with him?
Well, it was he was for the initial part of our the 10-year of our relationship and business partnership. It was he was sober, so there was no that wasn't a part of our it wasn't part of our relationship. And then I think there's some tragedy that fell upon him with his brother, and coming from an early past of tragedy. Things got hard mentally, and he slipped back in, and obviously that created some chaos, but that was created less effective kind of business decisions. Now, Burisma was already started, so that moment, that tipping point, had already happened at the end of the day, where the downhill spiral started, and I think a lot of those pressures of the media also contributed to it.
But you're tethered to this guy in business, right? And then he
Yes.
starts to fall apart.
Right, and it was not he made a lot of efforts to repair and go to rehab and get better. And then I, again, through another business that we're involved in, was kind of taken out, and then so I didn't go through the actual kind of full downward spiral and then rebirth. Only
You said
from
you
afar.
were taken out. Do you think you were taken out?
No, I can't comment on that. It's an ongoing case. So.
Probably not out of the realm of possibility, one suspects. Devon Archer, thank you for spending all this time.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it.
Really appreciate it.
Younger people say the news is full of lies.
In Kennedy's motorcade.
239 people. The death of Jeffrey Epstein.
Hey guys, Chris here from Amazon Outdoors. Be sure to subscribe, like, share, comment, and turn on notifications for Amazon Outdoors if you want to see more videos like this. Amazon Outdoors is a skull hanging company based out of Michigan. We use locally sourced steel to CNC plasma cut and fabricate all of our products. Our motto is simple, effective, and affordable. There are no fancy names or over-engineered designs. The hangers are built around the skull itself to allow you to securely hang your skull anywhere you please. They are priced with hunters in mind so you don't have to spend big money to hang your big bucks. AmazonOutdoors.com